of the Sport Limerick Soccer Podcast. We're joined by Jason and Noel O'Connor once again this evening. Jason, to start with yourself, obviously last weekend Treaty United lost their first game at the Markets Field at the hands of Galway United. In truth, Jason, it was a very poor game with very few chances in it, and was separated by a very good goal by Corey Cunningham. It's probably about the best way to sum it up.
Yeah, that's fair, Adrian. We were having a bit of banter before the kick-off, I suppose, about the starting 11, and myself and Noel predicted a draw, but if I'd seen that starting 11, I wouldn't have been predicting a draw. Certainly not. Obviously, there's a list of absentees, but Sean Gearns would be the one for me. When he's out of the side, the stats don't lie. He's been missing out of 2 of the 3 defeats, for Treaty this season. And when I saw him missing out of the starting 11 and out of the back 4, I was worried. I certainly was. Correct me if I'm wrong, the goal was the first shot on target or the first effort on target from either team, I think. So, yeah, look, a poor game. And when you look at the goal, it could have been avoided. In my opinion, I voiced my reservations about Clyde O'Connell in the back 4, especially. He obviously lost Pádraig Cunningham, free header inside the box, no blame, attached to Shane Cusack. But that's the difference in levels, Adrian, that I was kind of talking about, and that's what I was kind of referring to when I was saying that Clyde has a bit to learn at this level. You can look at performances in junior football, but anyone that's close to the game, I'm sure will agree that junior football has never been as poor in probably 30 years as it's been locally over the last couple of seasons. So I certainly have my reservations about him. Look, there's probably a place in the team somewhere for him, but not at centre-back for me. Look at Galway, very professional approach to the game. You'll probably have critics saying, no, they're full-time outfit, they should be serving up a better brand of football, but not for me. John Caulfield is in the results business. He's always been in the results business. And that's a fantastic result for Galway, and it brings them right back into it, obviously, as we were saying. You look at Treaty set pieces, nullified completely by Galway's defensive shape. They weren't overplaying in the wrong areas, which teams playing against Treaty have been guilty of over the season so far, and that's what Treaty grab onto, But yeah, look, no complaints, I suppose, really. As I said, looking at the starting 11, not surprised with the results. And now to move on to Cork.
Yeah, no, Jason mentioned there, obviously, maybe his concerns about the defending for the goal, but obviously it was probably disappointing that, and I mentioned this, Tommy, after the game, it's probably disappointing that regardless of, players injured, there was a strong 11 out there that has played throughout the season, that we didn't test Conor Kearns at all throughout the evening. Was that down to a lack of creativity from Treaty or good Galway defending? Because as Jason also mentioned, that was a real typical John Caulfield style performance, wasn't it, from Galway?
It was, and look, we said from day one that they were going to be very strong. I wouldn't read too much into the full-time either. I agree with Jason on that. I think, if they're still full-time in 4 or 5 years' time, you could probably call them a full-time team. They're a full-time team for a few months. It takes years to grind or to bed in all those full-time principles. But I thought they were very comfortable. Actually, I got in for the second half. It was great to be there. It looked like a proper game, in fairness, in terms of the tightness of it. There wasn't really too many chances created. Going back to my original point about Galway, I don't think they're going to beat anyone 3 or 4-0, even though maybe their dominance, you think that they might. I thought they were comfortable being 1-0 up. They had a few opportunities, like a few 2v2s and 3v3s. And it seemed to me that they weren't even interested in maybe taking a chance to try and, to go 2 or 3-0 up. They were happy enough to stay at 1-0. I thought in the second half, the pieces were a bit off anyway by Treaty. I thought it was a couple of bad deliveries, certainly out of character by Mark Ludden, maybe because he was playing against his ex-club, but a couple of overhit ones, I suppose, that kind of drifted out the back. And resulted in nothing really, but a comfortable win for Galway. I suppose the disappointing thing for Treaty was that even though, it was only 1-0, they didn't really create a whole lot, certainly in that second half. didn't test the keeper too much. And it was probably akin to the game against Cove as well, where they didn't really create a whole lot in that game either, but scored goals at the right moments, if you like, with set pieces, second phase maybe, and first and second phase. But other than that, they didn't create a whole lot.
Yeah, to be fair, Jason, this injury list is kind of almost turning into a crisis now. Very akin maybe 2018 when Tommy was over the Premier Division team, but he did have a lot of players who had injured history coming into the team at that stage. He's missing obviously Joel Custrain and Dean George pulled out late that we were unaware of, and we were also unaware of Sean Gearns, as you already mentioned, being missing for the game too. Then you had on William Armshaw who limped out of the ground on the night, and Ty Groin said that if he felt to kick the ball one more time that he thought his groin was going to go, I believe. So it's becoming we'd had a reservations, Jason, at the start of the year about squad depth. Obviously Tommy was only able to name 5 substitutes, 4 outfield. That's really starting to catch up with the team now as well, isn't it?
It is, Adrian, you know, and it was interesting to hear Tommy's interview with you after the game. He was obviously hurt by the defeat, which that's the first thing to note for me. That's a good sign. He was obviously like in the past, it was, this and that. But no, he was hurt by the result, and that's good. He gave the comment, I suppose, that if they lose another 10 games, then it won't really matter to the group. And I suppose, look, that echoes kind of a tweet that I put out maybe 3 weeks ago now, that they've already exceeded expectations. Realistic expectations for myself, yourself, and Noel was around 8 in the table, and that's based on who they had, and they've overachieved so far, Adrian. No one can dispute that. So, look, there's no pressure on them now going forward, but what I would like to see is a change in approach now with people out.
That's something I was going to bring up with you, Jason, because I know you mentioned that we obviously from your own time as James manager, we do know you like the 3-5-2 formation per se, but do you think this is the optimal time now, as you were going to say, maybe with players out for Tommy maybe to change from his formation now? I believe you do actually think that anyway.
Oh, I do, Adrian. They look very toothless now in attack. Let's be honest, it's there for everyone to see. They're not creating chances, putting one up front. And we were talking off camera there how easy probably it was for Maurice Nugent and Killian Bruder, 2 centre-backs just up against Matt McKevitt. But the options are there. Tommy said in his interview that he'd expect Sean Gearns back this week. So that would allow him a 3 centre-back. You can move Mark Ludden in as a left-sided centre-back. You can play Anto O'Donnell, obviously, as a central centre-back, and Sean Gearns on the right of the 3 central defenders. You have Charlie Fleming, who I thought was excellent against Galway. He was still trying to overlap in the 80th minute, and he's someone that has really kind of put in some excellent performances over the last couple of games. To get the best out of Clyde O'Connell, I suppose, a left wing-back position would suit him in that formation. Whether he's suspended now after picking up another booking is debatable. Alan Murphy, that's his most natural position. Callum McNamara, for me, has been excellent in the middle. Jack Lynch, and you can bring Matt Keane in off the wing for 3 central midfielders. And then you don't have to choose between Matt McKevitt and Kieran Hanlon. You can play both of them, Adrian. And that shape and that formation allows you to keep 5 at the back when you're out of possession. And it also gives you 2 up front when you're attacking, and the option for a wing back to join in when the ball is on their side of the pitch. So Tommy has said in the past he'd need time to work on that and stuff like that, but there's no time needed. Results aren't to the forefront of his mind now. He's already said that. So why not change it up? Why not give the opposition something different to think about? It would certainly be something that Cork wouldn't be expecting. And kind of they fell into the trap, if you like, Treaty of playing the same kind of 11 or 12 in the same formation. And you could see against Galway that John Caulfield really had to measure that formation, and it didn't cause him any problems. So personally, I'd love to see a change in it. There's no pressure on the team to get results, so why not change it up?
Yeah, Noel, do you think that it is maybe a time to look at a change? Because obviously there's no pressure on Tommy results-wise, as you said. So maybe it's the best chance for him to look at other players in different formations now.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one. It's easier said than done. Look, particularly when you're second in the table, you don't want to start making changes, and that one defeat turns into 2 or 3, and then you've kind of thrown the baby out with the bathwater. I think there's certainly the personnel are certainly there to play the 3-5-2. There's no doubt. I'm not so sure it'll happen away to Cork on Friday night, but I do think that playing 2 up front is something that they need to look at. There wasn't really much chemistry, I thought, between McKevitt and Kieran Hanlon when he came on, and it would be nice to see, because to me they, on paper they look like a good foil for each other, with Kieran playing with his back to the play, and he's good in the air, and then you have a guy who's willing to run in behind, and work tirelessly for the team. So if you want to play 2 up front, could possibly be a 4-4-2, could be an option as well. I think it might be a step too far for him to go for a 3-5-2, but we'll wait and see what happens.
Yeah, certainly. And Jason, we also obviously mentioned the injuries already, and it is far from ideal. There's now under-19s will be available from the 1st of July, I believe. I'm not so sure on time in terms of signing them on time or what goes on in that respect. But if it is a case, obviously, judging by the bench last week, you'll already probably have maybe 3 or 4 19s that he might be relying on to fill a squad on Friday night.
Yeah, and there's no harm in that either, Adrian. Certainly not. I remember playing in the old first division myself at 17 years of age. And excuse me, it is the physical side that you have to be able for and ready for. And that's even shown with the likes of Adam Foley, who hasn't got a look kind of at the moment, hasn't got a run at all. And it's the physical side of the game that you got to keep in mind, I suppose. William Shaw to a lesser degree only sees minutes, I suppose, when the tempo is down in the game. So that's something Tommy will be mindful of as well. But just going back to the formation in the Cork game for a second, they'll be looking for a point in Cork. There's no doubt about that, and especially looking at the games that are coming against UCD and Shelbourne. So putting 5 at the back, in my opinion, isn't really it's a bit of a no-brainer, Adrian, really. It gives you that platform, it gives you that strength at the back that was missing last week in the 4 without Sean Gearns, so it's certainly something that I'd like to see him ponder. I don't expect there to be a change, but we're here to give options and realistic ones, and it certainly is one.
Yeah, whether it is a 5-3-2 or a 4-2-3-1 or whatever formation he does decide to play on Friday night, Noel, realistically, despite the injuries, like, we must say that there is going to still be a very strong 11 who have played the majority of the season going to Cork, and a lot of them would have played in the first victory over Cork as well at the Markets Field. There is 10 points between the sides. As Jason said, you certainly probably wouldn't be disappointed with a draw, considering what's coming down the road as well with Shelbourne and UCD. And a draw might also almost put pay to Cork City as well, like Treaty did to Cove a couple of weeks previously.
Yeah, it's a big game. There's no doubt about it. I think looking at the Cork results overall, since then, they've kind of gradually improved. Like, obviously, a notable away win in Athlone. Even though they lost last week to Shelbourne, I felt maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago that match might have been a 4 or 5-0 defeat for them. The way they were going, it was 2-1, and by all accounts, they were a bit unlucky not to get something out of it. So I think they will be a different proposition to what they were, in the Markets Field in the first series of games. And I would agree and say, like, it would be a big point to get, and an important point to get for Treaty if they could get a draw on Friday night. Cork are another team, bar the Wexford game, they haven't scored a lot of goals either. I think it'll be another very tight and cagey game with the two teams. It'll be probably like a game of chess, I'd say, and it's probably likely to end up in a draw. And I think the draw would be a very good point for Treaty to pick up and bring back to the Markets Field.
Yeah, I certainly echo that. I do agree with you on that as well. Jason, Cork City, obviously it's been a season of struggle so far for them. Noel alluded to the fact that they have picked up their performances. Apparently, obviously a very good result against that Loan and performance as well to match. Apparently, similar against Shelburne last week. Although Healy was disappointed, but it just seems crazy, really, that a team. I know you and Noel both said you don't read too much into maybe teams being full time, although Cork have been obviously for many years at this stage. But for them to be in this position is something we certainly didn't predict at the start of this year when we're halfway through the season now.
No, definitely not. And they wouldn't have predicted it on Lee's side either, Adrian. What full-time gives you is the opportunity to assess the opposition more and work on different patterns of play, I suppose, to nullify the opposition and create chances for yourself, as well as obviously getting the players up to speed a lot faster than a part-time environment. For me, the big difference last week in full-time, and it could possibly be the same this week, was the approach by Galway. As I said a while ago, they didn't encourage Treaty by playing in the wrong areas. They didn't give Treaty anything to kind of hold on to. They weren't playing balls into the middle of the field where Treaty have been turning that possession over and then counter-attacking teams. They were well set up at set pieces. And if Cork City spend the time on them topics, Adrian, then it could be very similar this weekend. They've lost Jack Baxter. He's gone back to Preston. He was on loan for them, and someone at the fans down there were very, very impressed with, and we look at some of the Treaty players, and we look at Jack Baxter as an example, 20 years of age, 10 appearances, 2 goals, 1 assist, and 2 yellow cards. And we can talk about yellow cards, Adrian. He's a defensive midfielder. Treaty players picking up yellow cards, and I'd be interested to hear Noel's opinion on this. It has to change your approach during the game. If a defender or a defensive midfielder picks up a yellow card, he then has to think how he's going to tackle, where he's going to tackle for the rest of the game, with the fear of picking up a red card. So that's the type of stuff that I'm talking about when we talk about Treaty players picking up silly yellow cards and stuff like that. Even if they don't get a red, it affects performances, it affects the games. And we're looking at a 20-year-old here, obviously coming from a professional environment, so a lot more professional mindset, but that has to be drilled into the Treaty players' heads, because it does affect the game. And if Treaty approach it the same as last week, 4-3-3, I'd be worried with a 4-4-2. I really would. I think they'd be open and a little bit exposed in a 4-4-2. So, look, I'd be fancying Cork this weekend, Adrian, hand on heart. I hate saying it, but I think they'll have too much.
Yeah, Noel, I was speaking to McShiel after the game, and obviously it's a line that Tommy has used when I've interviewed him on regular occasions, is that his team need to be 120% at it every week to get results. That's a fair comment, to be fair. The way teams would normally get away with a bad performance and get a result. Treaty probably aren't really built like that in terms of effort and setup. But as Jason said, I suppose Friday night, once again, discipline will probably be a key factor in the game too, I suppose.
Yeah, and look, I've touched on it a few times. I think about the staying on your feet and closing down the space and not committing too early to a tackle, because now if you're off your feet and you don't make a clean connect with the ball, it is a yellow card. And Jason is right. It's very easy to be sent off in this league, and typically around the midfield, at times I felt that that they've been too quick to go to ground. And they just needed to stay on their feet and show a bit more mental discipline, if you like jocking your opponent and closing down the space and showing him one side or the other and just matching the run, rather than think that that you have to dive in straight away and win the ball. And that's a bit of experience as well. But you're right, it does have to come from the management as well. It has to be your mantra about being disciplined, and staying on your feet and not giving away cheap frees. I mean, look at some of the cheap frees that Treaty have profited themselves from other teams giving it away. But I feel that we need to, as a group, they need to get away from the talk about the referee. I think there was talk about a penalty that wasn't given last week as well. It's kind of a regular team. You have the club PRO who's interviewing the manager, and it nearly always comes up in conversation about a decision that didn't go their way. But the reality is that every game you play, you're not going to get every decision. And some of them go against you and some of them go with you. And probably need to park that one a little bit and just focus on their own discipline, and they'll find, over time it'll build and build, because it's just as much a part of the game as, working on your set plays and working on your mentality and all those other facets that eventually build a strong side and a side that can be successful.
Yeah, Noel, just to stick with yourself for a moment. I know obviously you still have your contacts in Cork, like we've mentioned a couple of times on this podcast before. What's the feeling like maybe between the players that still have an interest in Cork City on Colin Healy? I suppose he's probably been under pressure all season. Has that pressure waned in any way since we played him first?
I doubt it has. I said at the start, and I did say at the start that I thought that they would struggle a bit, and the reason is because they were relegated and they didn't seem to realise it, or they did, the enormity of it didn't really hit home. I mean, in fairness to Limerick a few years ago, there was a kind of a backlash, if you like, when they were relegated, and they were a team that hadn't been in the Premier for too long, and for a team like Cork to go down, you see the reaction in Shelbourne when they went down. I didn't get that reaction. But there's certainly a lot of ex players that are around Cork, and obviously some of them for good and some of them maybe not be for good. When things are bad, there certainly is a lot of pressure on the guy who's in charge there. The guys who are talking, who are ex-players, maybe a lot of them haven't managed, or they haven't been in that hot seat, so it's very easy for them to give their opinion. But it certainly is a pressurized environment and a pressurized job. There's no doubt about it. You can be under pressure in Cork, and you're second in the league, in the Premier League. So I can only imagine what it's like if you're down in the first division and you're caught adrift even from third or fourth place. Not to mind the top place, but that's something that Colin Healy's going to have to deal with. And I suppose if they do look like that they're going to have a stronger second half than they had in the first half, and if they can do that, I'm sure things will work out okay for him.
Yeah, definitely. And on a positive note, Jason, there's obviously a Player of the Month award for June. There's been 3 nominations for it rather than 4 this month. Probably the standout player, well, I'll let you talk about it yourself, but you've got Matt McKevitt, Callum McNamara and Charlie Fleming. I think if I was to pick myself tomorrow, I'd probably pick Callum McNamara in terms of consistency. What would be your own opinion on that?
Yeah, I mentioned Charlie Fleming a while ago. I think he's been excellent, like in the Cove game and especially in the Galway game. Whether he can consistently, I suppose, do that remains to be seen. But he's been doing very, very well over the last month. Callum McNamara, for me, for a young boy in Newmarket Celtic, has slotted in, and for me, he can't be taken out of the team. Adrian, he's done really, really well. So while I'd be leaning towards Callum, maybe Charlie Fleming might just nudge it, because I suppose goal/assist, whatever way you want to look at it, against Cove, and an excellent performance in the Markets Field against Galway. Callum has been very, very steady, I suppose, and might go under the radar for a lot of people who are expecting big diagonal passes that don't go anywhere and stuff like that, but the more trained eye would see how effective he's been since coming into the side. And it'll be very, very close.
Yeah, and interestingly, on Charlie Fleming, Noel, I know at the start of the season you mentioned about Charlie Fleming that he was very vocal about his departure from Cork City and was obviously unhappy about last season, saying that maybe he didn't get enough time on the pitch, and COVID ruined that for him as well. You did mention at the time that you thought he would be well advised not to say anything. This will be a game, obviously, that he will be well hyped up for, it, you'd imagine. And this also brings you back to the point from Jason that it's got to be, I've said this to Tommy before, and he says you always have to be controlled aggression, but it really does in the case of Charlie Fleming, because you can build these things up in your head before games, can't you?
You can, but I think, like he, as Jason mentioned, he was very good below in Cove, and that was, in the first round of games, he might have been great that night against Cove, and wasn't he was thinking about other things, if you like. So maybe he is mature and he's got a good run of games. He's obviously got a bit fitter. I just thought he struggled a bit in some games toward the end, but he's playing every week, and I suppose it gives you that opportunity to build your match fitness. I certainly he wouldn't be my choice on 2 games for the month to be player of the month. I would actually think that for sheer consistency, Colin McNamara has been very good. He's come in there and he hasn't really put a foot wrong. And I thought that Willie Armshaw was unlucky not to get a nomination, because you talk about players making an impact. He mightn't have had the minutes on the pitch, but the minutes he was on the pitch, bar last Friday, certainly made a massive impression. Made a massive impression against Bray, made a massive impression against Wexford, and made a massive impression against Cove as well. So he's a bit unlucky not to be in, because in terms of assists and goals, I think he's been up there with everyone else.
Yeah, and I know obviously Noel is kind of hoping and was saying that a draw would be the outcome in Turner's Cross. And Jason, you said that your hand on heart, it would be Cork City that you would go for. Just to go on to our predictions for the other games. I'm going to start, Jason, with Wexford versus Athlone. Ian Wright, jeez, if it was Ian Wright, it'd be something. But Ian Ryan has come into the Wexford camp, obviously, as manager, replacing Brian O'Sullivan. And there was a lot of talk of, obviously, brought Larkin Fitz. There was a lot of talk in Wexford that everything has become more professional. And, unfortunately for Wexford, results really haven't shown that. And I suppose if you were Brian O'Sullivan, you'd be saying it hasn't really improved all that much, realistically, outside of that, him getting that first win. They have Athlone now, a team in poor enough form as well. It's an absolute opportune moment for Wexford to get a home victory, but it remains to be seen whether that can be achieved.
Yeah, I predicted they'd give Cove a game last week, and they certainly did, Adrian. They were 1-up through Paul Fox just before half time, but obviously fell behind then 3-1, 3 quick goals from Cove, 47, 61 and 76 minutes kind of killed it. They got one back in injury time, but look, I'd agree with you. Performances have improved, but results haven't. And it is a results business. We've said that earlier about John Caulfield, but it's different ends of the table, Adrian. It really is, things aren't right in that loan. That was kind of predicted by the three of us at the outset. Can they beat Wexford? Yeah, they can. But will they? Is debatable. I'll go for a draw on that one, Adrian, because I'm not convinced by Athlone at all at the moment. As I said, things aren't right there. They have a lot of injuries as well. And yeah, I think Wexford could run them, definitely.
Yeah, that will be an interesting game. Noel, obviously UCD are hosting Galway at the Belfield Bowl on Friday. That's going to be a big game because Galway are coming into this full of confidence, and then UCD, on the other hand, have had fairly patchy form because everyone thought only a few weeks ago that UCD were nailed on for a playoff spot. That's not so nailed on now, although obviously we still think that they will gain one of those 4 playoff places.
Yeah, difficult game to predict as well. UCD, who were in such fine form before the break, they've kind of lost their mojo a little bit, but they still have all their good players, and you're just thinking that they're going to click again. Galway, definitely a different proposition to than the one maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. Obviously, a lot of confidence, 3 wins in the bounce, not conceding goals. So I'd fancy a draw there as well. I think it'd probably end up a 1-1 draw. I couldn't see a lot of goals in it.
Yeah, and Jason, you probably wouldn't be envying Cavantilly's task the way things are going at the moment. They have to go to Talca Park and play Shelburne. But I have to say, I mentioned obviously that Cavantilly are like Jekyll and Hyde at times. You just never know what you're going to get from them. So I suppose in that sense, it's probably it might, even though we'd obviously be edging towards Shelburne, Cavantilly may be the one team that could upset them, judging on that Jekyll and Hyde kind of tag I've given them.
Not so sure, Adrian. Listen to Colin Healy last week after the Cork and Shells game. He kind of made it clear, like, you give chances, you hand up chances to people like Michael O'Connor and Brennan and Maddie and the list goes on, and they'll punish you, and Cavantilly, 6 wins and 7 defeats, no draws. So I don't think they'll be going there looking for a draw. I think, in fairness to them, they try win games as opposed to picking up points along the way. But no doubt in my mind, I think Shelburne will turn them over. And I suppose if you're looking at Treaty, and I'm not expecting them to get anything off Cork, you'd be hoping, I suppose, that Shelburne turn Cavantilly over and that they don't pick up a result and go to within a point of Treaty if obviously they don't get anything in Cork.
Yeah, definitely. I know it'd probably be beneficial for the rest of the division now for Shelburne to beat everyone at this stage with the way they've been playing as well. For the last game, obviously, Bray versus Cove, Bray at home. Noel, speaking to Treaty players and staff behind the scenes, they do believe that Bray, despite having maybe patchy form of their own at times, would get into the playoffs. I suppose firstly, do you share that optimism for Bray, and do you think that they'll turn Cove over on Friday?
Yeah, I'd have to say yes to both. I think they have been quite good in a lot of games. They were missing Gary Shaw at the start. They seem to struggle to get goals. I think the goals are coming a little bit more easy now. They had a good win below in Cove as well, and I would expect them to win on Friday night against Cove.
Yeah, and just a bit on the Euro 2020 championships, despite it being 2021, but the Euro 2020 championship, Jason, I know you were a keen watcher of the game this evening between England and Germany. Obviously, England come out trumps with a 2-0 victory. Judging by their pathway that they can get to the final now, it really opens it up for England. They probably won't get a better chance of at least getting to a final, especially with the fact that they've played a lot of games at their home venue as well.
Yeah, you're quite right, Adrian. The way it's set up now with the draw, they won't get a better chance to get to a final at least. And the way Southgate has them set up, they don't look like they're going to concede too many goals. Obviously, the turning point in the game today was Muller's chance one-on-one when the game is at 1-0. And if he takes that, then maybe things change. But when you're involved in competition, football and stuff like that goes your way, then you start to believe a little bit more that, it could be your time to do it. And we know the English lads don't need any encouragement to believe that, Adrian. It's been coming home now for quite a while. But as I said, look, the draw certainly favoured them. France got out of the competition as well, massive. And look, my prediction was to get to the kind of quarter final. I think they'll go past that now. They could even make the final.
Yeah, definitely. And Noel, the two previous winners of major competitions, France and Portugal, both got knocked out in recent days. Obviously, the French in dramatic circumstances yesterday evening against Switzerland. It just opens up the whole competition. There are standout teams, obviously, in terms of, we'll say, Belgium and Italy in particular have caught a lot of people's eye. But then again, you just couldn't really rule out anyone, particularly even people were writing off Spain. And now look at the result they picked up as well. So it is wide open, to be fair, still.
Yeah, it looked wide open even, before the last couple of games. It was wide open. It was very, very hard to pick a winner. The Swiss looked fantastic last night, in the spirit, the goals they got, the way they kept going. You've Italy and Belgium now in probably the standout game on paper anyway, and it looks like that Hazard and De Bruyne won't be playing. The Italians will be the team, I suppose, that'll look like that they might get in at the other side, even though it would be a bit harder to predict. But it's those teams, England against Germany obviously was a big game. I think the Germans have been very poor the last couple of years. I didn't really fancy them to do much. It looked like a game that was going to peter out to extra time and maybe penalties, and England got a couple of late goals, but it's still a long way to go. And you would have that little worry about the mentality of the English players if they do, or whether it's Sweden or the Ukraine, and then follow that, whoever else they have to play, whether it's the Czech Republic or Denmark, that they might just take them a little bit for granted. And they're probably the games that they might slip up on. But we'll have to wait and see.